Human resource. Victoria, this is the meat of it. You get through this, we give you a break, so thanks for your indulgence.
All right, let the fun begin. Okay. First thing, and I want to set the stage just as much as Dr. McGrath did. I think when you look at human resources, it's very, very easy to lay blame. It's very easy to say the fire department gets too much. It's very easy to say that the city did this or the city didn't do that. Let's put it bluntly. When it comes to an agreement, a contract is signed by two parties. It's signed by the city and it's signed by the AFF, which means both parties did it, not one versus the other. You worked together somehow to get there, or in some cases you had a third party make that decision for you. The contract didn't happen overnight. This just didn't happen with this last negotiation session with the current negotiation team for the city and the current union board. This contract has evolved over the years. It is not atypical to find that all of a sudden over the years things have changed. We go into contract negotiations with our list of things that we want to talk about. And sometimes when we change the language for this one item, we sometimes forget or we neglect to see the consequences for other impacts to language within that contract. This is not unusual. This is not unique to the Department of Elyria. I've negotiated contracts for almost 12 different unions over 17 years. And this happens all over the place. The problem is, once this comes to someone's attention, what are we going to do about it? And I guess that's the question we're going to do right now. You know, can the two parties work together? I'll tell you, when I asked that question, when I did interviewing, I got mixed results. Unfortunately, it wasn't a consensus. I had a lot of people give me lip service that said, yes, this time it's going to be different. This time we are going to lay down the past, we are going to stop the grievances, we are going to stop the arguing in the press because we want to move forward to provide quality service to our residents. And I guess the question is now, your feet are to the fire, no pun intended. What are you going to do about it? The HR section is a rather lengthy report. Contrary to Mrs. Mitchell, who did want me to stand up here and read the entire section to you, kidding. I am going to gloss over the more important areas. There are areas that are addressed within the report that I'm not going to spend time on. I did read each article of your contract. Not sure how many of you have done that lately, but it's a good contract for the most part. It obviously has some opportunities for it. I have provided in the administrative report my recommendations for each section of the report. Some of them are remained unchanged, some need some slight modifications, some need some drastic improvement. But obviously I'm not going to take the time tonight to go through each one of those. I'm not going to spend too much time on recruitment other than talking about some of the high positions. You have the Civil Service Commission. For the most part, it's doing its job. I think it needs to have some changes. There's some issues with paperwork that we just need to be careful who gets that paperwork so we don't have any potential claims of discrimination. But for the most part, they have a pretty good thorough process when it comes to recruitment for a firefighter. We'll talk a little bit about promotions. I think they could use some work in that area. But for the most part, the civil service has done a very good job in putting together an fair and unbiased process. Again, I'm not going to spend much time or at all on performance evaluations because you're not doing them. And I think that's an avenue that really has some great opportunities. I thoroughly would not recommend at any point in time we just go out and find the neighbor next door's performance evaluation and slap our name on it with a cut and paste versus get a labor management team together and develop and craft an instrument that's going to work for you and to get at the goals of what an evaluation system should. And also, there are also some issues with your personnel records, and I've spent quite a bit of time within the report talking about that. And again, that's something that you can work on. To getting into the meat of the topic, obviously the question is work days. An average firefighter, not the City of Elyria, but an average firefighter for the most part works 122 days or 121 days depending upon the shift. The average, and then the average in this community, as well as the average pretty much nationwide, is about 12 vacation days, which brings your work days down to 110. Most fire departments look at around 8 holidays, which means the average employee works about 102 hours per year, which equates to 2,448 hours. I know I've seen some things in newspapers, and we want to make sure that we make sure that the firefighters get credit for the number of hours they actually do work. As we've indicated, there were some issues with the average work days here within the City of Elyria. After looking at the new data, it does increase to about 82.75. We did take out these are only shift employees. These are not 40-hour-a-week employees. Anybody who was out on a long-term illness has been excluded. There have been employees that started during the middle of the year. They were excluded. There were a couple of some folks that were on very, very extended military leaves. They were also eliminated. The point here, and I think that we really need to look at, is I'm sure we can argue about the number. I'm sure that there's probably new data that has been discovered since I came out here last week, Thursday, that's going to now dispute the 82.75. I think the question becomes is, how much time off does that contract allow? And that's what we need to look at. There are some definite opportunities when it comes to time off, because you do allow a lot of time off, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We do have some problems with the sick leave, and we'll talk about those. And so the question becomes, is there a way that we can shore those up so that not only do the employees have what the average or what the comparable fire department employee has, but also something that's fiscally responsible for the city. As I started talking about earlier, there's something called a 4-for-3 rule. Because firemen have a unique schedule, either 24/48 or a variation thereof, which is what your organization has, there typically is a lot of time off. And I'm going to be very stereotypical here for a second, because we are going to talk about compensation as well. But when we look at the public sector as a whole, and a lot of my studies, besides audits, include compensation studies. Very stereotypically, government entities have had average salaries, and they've had very good to lucrative benefits, versus the private sector, and again, I'm being very stereotypical, which says, you know, we usually have higher salaries, but we may have average benefits. And that's how folks have been lured into working for the public sector versus the private sector. Unfortunately, what's been happening, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, is health insurance, as we know, as that debate looms on. And as a result of that, health insurance is becoming an equalizer. And so therefore, the very lucrative benefits that the public sector can provide are starting to erode. And therefore, the average salary that used to be given is now there's a rub, because now we're looking at an average salary with somewhat less lucrative benefits. And so therefore, the question becomes, why would I want to work for the public sector when I can possibly earn more from the private? And so therefore, it's not uncommon at all to see more benefits, especially in police and fire departments. And as a result of that, there's the 4-for-3 rule, which basically says, in order to staff three shifts, I need to have a fourth person. Because I need to have that fourth person to cover the time off benefits that have been given. Most of our studies, when we look at that 4-for-3 rule, it doesn't equate to 1. It's 0.7, 0.75 of an additional person that's needed. And we usually just say another person, because how do you hire 0.7 of an individual? In the case of Elyria, is that we need 1.42 people for every 3 persons to cover in the amount of days off. By contract, and again, we can argue whether it should be 58 days, whether it should be 82.75 days, whether it should be 89 days, the average employee here has 34 days off. It can increase to almost 37 days off if we look at the vacation allotment for a person that is 21 years of service or more. We can probably argue about 1 day, and that's whether or not you have 1 or 2 personal holidays. I was told very adamantly when I came out here the first time as well as the second time, no, the contract reads that we have 2 personal holidays. The way I read the contract, it should be only 1. The way it's being administered is that there's 2. So whether or not it's 34 days or 33 days, I think becomes academic, but we need to look at how much time off is granted by the contract.